Welcome to the Power of One. My name is Brian Berry and I'm your host. This program demonstrates the fact that one person can make a difference. Today, I'm very, very fortunate to have in the studio with us Victoria Knapp, who's the chair of the Altadena Town Council. Victoria, thank you very much for being here today.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Great. Our community has suffered quite a bit the last 6 months, so what I wanted to do first was to check in with you. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How has this moment been for you?
As you know, we lost our house in the fire. We were on the leading edge of the fire, so I would say that the 6 months has been unlike any other trauma I've experienced in my life. It's unique to an urban wildfire. In the time leading up to the 6-month anniversary, it was extremely emotional, lots of tears. I'm not really even sure why. But now that we're on the other side, things feel hopeful. So I would like to exist in that space more than in the other space.
Yeah, so you and I have something in common. We were both born and raised here in Pasadena. And I actually lived in Altadena for a little while. And my aunt and uncle moved there in the 1950s. So we've had a family house up in Altadena since that time. I know you were born and raised in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. What originally brought you to Altadena?
My husband is from New Jersey, and he wanted to be in a less planned neighborhood with sidewalks and curbs that was on a grid. So we started to look for something that would more closely mirror sort of what he had when he was in New Jersey. And ultimately, after an 18-month-long process, found the house that we ended up buying in Altadena 15 years ago.
Yeah, because I have such a close connection to Altadena, and because I lived there for a while, I've always thought that it was very unique and special. From your perspective, what characteristics create a space that's different from many other towns around the country?
Altadena is unique in Los Angeles, it's unique in California, and very unique for a town of its size in this country. The community members are what make it unique, but the topography also speaks to that we are up against the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, that we are an urban wildlife interface. That there are generational families in Altadena, as well as families that have just moved to Altadena from other parts of the area in order to raise their family in a more natural, maybe rural setting. I mean, I wouldn't call Altadena rural, but definitely being part of unincorporated LA County makes us feel way less like a city.
Yeah, and being adjacent to the Angeles National Forest and the wilderness area is incredible. And I know so many people who go hiking up in the canyons. So there is that kind of wild, but then also next to a civilization sort of a feel.
Yes, definitely being close to the incorporated cities that we're surrounded by is extremely helpful to Altadenans, because they can live up in this sort of foothill community, but not be too far away from all the amenities that they need.
Yeah. Shifting gears just a little bit, you did something that I think some folks think about, but then never really necessarily have the courage to do, and then a lot of people say, there's no way I would ever run for office. So what inspired you to run for office, and what's that experience been like?
My dad was city attorney of Pasadena when I was growing up, and so I had a lot of experience being in the halls of City Hall and understanding civic engagement from that perspective. And I was very connected to Pasadena and all of the levers that made Pasadena work. So when we moved up to Altadena, I felt very out of my depth, if you will. And so I started to figure out as quickly as I could, where do I get information up here? There was no, city council, no mayor, none of that. So I started almost immediately attending the town council meetings, because I realized that was where the information was. And I'm sure that council members from that time will tell you that I was not their normal participant. Like, I did not talk from the audience. I was constantly raising my hand. And it was because of that those relationships built over time that I was asked to consider running for my census tract.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are some people in the audience thinking about possibly running. What do you think prepared you historically or during your developmental years? What prepared you to be a high-quality elected official?
Well, thank you for that. It was really my career. My entire career was in sales. It was business to business sales. And I worked my way up over the course of my tenure there. And my last role was chief of staff to our COO. And it was probably that role, understanding how to be a buffer between him and all of our employees, how to prepare him for public speaking and speeches, how to shoulder the burden of information that could not be passed along. So I think all of those, and I'm a natural people person, and I'm a connector. I am not at all a person who operates a personal agenda. Nothing is ever about me. It's about how can my experience help inform the experience and progress of others.
Yeah, and one thing that, that description makes me think about are leadership qualities. Because quite often we have people in leadership positions who maybe don't have some of those qualities. What do you define as a strong leader? What are some of the basic, I would say, values or structural components that a leader needs?
If you were to have asked any of the staff that reported to me over the years, they would tell you that I was tough but fair. And I think that that is probably the thing that defines me. I was referred to as a velvet hammer. So I could have an extremely difficult conversation with you behind closed doors in my office, and then you could leave and our relationship would carry on with no grudge and no pretext, and you wouldn't have to be on eggshells or what have you. I'm not afraid to put myself out there. I'm not a great fan of criticism, not in the sense that I can't take it, but if it's unfounded, it bothers me. So that has probably been the thing I've struggled with the most, being in front and center of this disaster, is the criticism that may not be founded in reality. But I would say being tough and fair is probably the thing.
Yeah, that criticism, then to a certain extent, you have to have what's known as a thick skin, or you have to be able to separate the criticism from the work you're actually doing. I know you all have been under a lot of pressure and constant demands. How have you been able to work together? Thinking about, I think another leadership quality is teamwork. And so thinking, again, I know some of the other council members and just working together, how has that been, and what strategies have you used to keep together?
So the council is made up of 16 reps that represent the 8 census tracts in Altadena. There's 2 reps per tract. And 16 people is a lot of people to corral. That's a lot of personalities, that's a lot of diverse personalities. Certainly things prior to the fire looked very different. It was an extremely cohesive team. There was a lot less pressure and a lot less front and center spotlight for most of the council members. This has changed that probably for the rest of the life and longevity of the council, So the first thing we did, and this was we have a very cohesive executive committee, and that committee drove the process of our immediate crisis management and then our recovery since then. And the thing I knew we needed to do immediately, because there was so much information coming from so many different sources, which is one of the problems of being in an unincorporated town, is we had to get a centralized opportunity for people to hear what was important and then to share out what they were hearing back from their constituents. So very early on, we started convening meetings every Monday night, just so that we could get the most important information to the council members, so that they could be articulate to their constituents, and then they could give me back and us back what they were hearing, so that we could then go find out how to help.
Yeah, you've touched on it a couple of times, but there is a distinction between an incorporated city and an unincorporated county area, which is a town. And thinking about the teamwork and what you've been doing together, how have there been advantages or disadvantages for being unincorporated during this process?
Having lived in an incorporated city my entire life until we moved to Altadena, I would say that there are advantages and disadvantages. The advantage to being in an unincorporated town, especially in LA County, and one that is governed by the Board of Supervisors, which is arguably the most powerful board in the
Right.
country, is that there are resources, but there is a hands-offness to it as well. So people in Altadena are allowed to live their lives. They're not policed directly. I don't mean that in a law enforcement way, but nobody is up there actively surveilling what's going on. It really is much more based on complaints, right? If they get a complaint, then someone's going to come up and investigate. Otherwise, we're really left to our own devices. But to have the power and the financial resources of the Board of Supervisors in LA County has been very beneficial to Altadenans.
Yeah, yeah. It's been amazing to watch. Again, being a member of the community as well, but to see the response both from the elected officials, but then also from the bureaucratic or the government staff as well. What would you say? Thinking about, because there's going to be a lot of analysis.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say have been the greatest challenges? You talked about the communication, but then thinking about the residents themselves, not just the Altadena Town Council, what have been some of the greatest challenges they've had to go through these last 6 months?
I would say the greatest challenge is the uncertainty. There is a period of time that sort of necessarily follows a disaster of this magnitude, where you really do need to put things on pause, especially very significant decision making. And I would say that because of the way information is funneled to the community, it probably didn't get out fast enough for those that really were feeling angst-ridden about making a decision. The other thing that's really been troubling for us is that we were cast to the wind. So you evacuate a town of 42,000 people, and half of them can't come back because their homes are destroyed, and we're everywhere from other states to every other part of California, from San Diego to north of San Francisco, as people are trying to stabilize their lives and decide what they're trying to do. And so it's extremely hard to reach people.
Yeah, one of the other areas that has been, I think, really, really heartbreaking is the small businesses. So when I lived, one of the times when I lived in Altadena, I lived near the Altadena Hardware. And so when because I've walked around in Altadena quite a bit the last 6 months. So the first time I went up there, just a week or so after the flames were extinguished, it was just devastating to see. I mean, I was just heartbroken to see that row of shops, and particularly the hardware store. So what are your thoughts about helping small businesses, or how are they kind of shifting and being able to potentially survive for now and then possibly come back?
I would say that the recovery of the small businesses is going to lag in some measure the residential recovery. It's just the way of it's the nature of the beast. Because my entire career was in business sales, I have made it a point personally to know as many of the business owners in Altadena as I possibly can, as well as many of the landlords, because it's one thing to be a small business owner that's leasing a space, and then the property owner is someone else, right, who may not even live here. Although we are fortunate that a number of the larger shareholders in Altadena live in the area, so that's been helpful. One of the things that has been at the fore of my mind as we've moved beyond 6 months now is getting other communities outside of Altadena to support Altadena small businesses. I've always felt that whenever...
And what does that look like?
It means that, it looks like me recruiting people from working through the mayor's office of Pasadena to make sure that the businesses that are open in Altadena are known to Pasadenans, that it's known to Sierra Madreans and known to La Cañadans, because their business will continue to be sort of supported. It doesn't take very much to support these small businesses that are open sort of a fraction of the time that they normally would be in a fraction of the staff. So the most critical thing for our small businesses is that those that can get open, and there are several that are sort of in line to get open that are waiting for remediation, and that those that want to be open have the opportunity to find space to get open if their spaces were destroyed.
Yeah, and your thought about informing the community, it was really fascinating. We had a business meeting at the Altadena Ale House.
Yes.
But what's fascinating, so that's operating, but I thought, and then you just go to the block behind it and it's completely
gone,
devastated. There's nothing there. And so I thought it was closed. But my friend said, no, we can go have our meeting there because it's open. It's destroyed behind it, but we can meet there. So I think that's kind of what you're referring to, right, is to make sure that people know which businesses are open and which they can support.
And who's open when.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, because you're not going, because of the devastation, you know, I think that it's important for folks to understand. We talk in a lot of different numbers, but we did a disaster overlay map with the county GIS department, and 66% of Altadena structures are gone. So you have to know who's open and when they're open. No one is up in Altadena at night, certainly after the sun goes down, unless we're at the Rotary concerts at Loma Alta Park, which have been fabulous and a whole nother topic of conversation in our healing. But to know who's open, when they're open, and what services they're providing. So for instance, there'll be a ribbon cutting of sorts this coming Wednesday for Webster's. We're finally going to get USPS to open a counter there, as they had in the past, so that Altadenans can get stamps and mail things, and that is going to be a big step in our sort of feeling normal, if you will. Who would have thought that a post office could mean so much, but it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the lines out in front of the Lincoln post office that just stretched down the block, especially right at the very beginning when people were trying to make sure that,
Yeah, and we are continuing our conversations with USPS about a permanent space. So they lost their structure on Lake, which they were also renting or leasing. And so we have, through the county, given them a number of prospects for them to look into, so that in a year from now, they have stood up a more functional, full-service post office.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you're alluding to, and just thinking about, you know, there have been a lot of challenges, but you said you were feeling optimistic now, or you're feeling positive. What are some signs of hope and optimism for you?
Every time a business returns to Altadena, it's a sign of hope. So when Webster's reopened, when Fair Oaks Burger reopened, when Adelaide, which is a very new florist and gift store, reopened, those were all big shining moments. Then you take moments like Bevel Coffee, which is a coffee cart that's been operating on the patio of Prime Pizza. He found space on Allen in Altadena, and he's going to open a full service coffee place, which I think is going to restore the community feel of that part of town. So all of that gives me hope, combined with the progress that the county is making in approving building permits. The rebuilding in Altadena is critical to our recovery emotionally. And that is really what gives people hope. So you can drive through Altadena now, 98.6% of the town is cleared of its debris. By, I would say, probably October, the remaining properties will be cleared. That sense of clearance, the lack of debris, has changed people's opinions of town. You can drive through and not be so heartbroken every single day by seeing the things that you know are no longer there. And then we do have framing going up, and that is critical to the hopefulness, because you know, there are about, I would say I think we're approaching 350 properties that have been sold and that are for sale now. And as those properties and the properties of those that have remained in Altadena that are committed to rebuilding start to frame, I think that that is going to give those that are on the fence about what to do some hope too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry for your personal loss. It's devastating. Our family, various parts of our family have gone through, had similar losses, but I just want to
Thank you.
make sure that you know that
I
I'm thinking about you as well.
I appreciate it.
How do you think this event has affected your, whether it's, hurricane, flood, these are unexpected to a certain degree. How do you think the Eaton Fire has affected your leadership skills and your leadership, how you show up in this moment?
I would say that we had a dress rehearsal for this event with the Bobcat Fire. Yeah. And I remember then, especially as that fire began to encroach on the Mount Wilson Observatory, knowing that Altadena was in its crosshairs. So I took the skills of communicating that event and parlayed them into at least knowing how to communicate a fire event. Yeah. I'm everywhere. And that's the thing that has changed. I mean, I'm a personable person. I like to be approachable, but when I think at last count, I've attended something like 1,500 meetings and public events, and it's extremely important to me that people know that they can approach me and I have people just even at the Rotary event on Saturday night that will come up and share their stories of problems or where they need help, and then I will connect them to the resource that will help them, and that is the most satisfying part of this whole catastrophe.
And to be honest, that's invaluable, because it's the conduit, or it's the facilitator that enables people to find the resources that they need. And oftentimes they're either people are too busy, or they don't have the knowledge that you do, or the relationships that you do to be able to make that happen. So what are you doing as far as self-care, or making sure that you don't explode under 1,500 meetings in 6 months?
I will say this. I have leaned heavily on the other leaders in Altadena. 4 Altadena Town Council members lost their home. Mark Mariscal, who is involved intrinsically with the Rotary, lost his home. So many of us are hurting in the same way, that there is partnership and fellowship in that experience. I also have a very strong family. I have children, one of which just graduated from high school. I have another that's a rising 8th grader at Elliott, which has been displaced, as you know, to the McKinley campus, and we're now in the process of demolishing the auditorium and 6th grade wing there. I did return to working out. I did return to therapy. And I do try to have as many social events as I can with people who were in my inner circle prior to this event, because they know who I am and they know what I'm about. And so that gives me a lot of agency to just be myself. I will say that most recently, the return of those concerts that once were held at Farnsworth Park in the Davies building, which is gone. Right. Being held at Loma Alta Park in the grass, where you can commune with community, is literally the first opportunity Altadenans have had to come back in a social way that is not related to the fire. And that I said it that very night. Yeah. This is the beginning of healing, because people are able to commune with each other, share with each other. There's a lot of resources that get shared when, there's a Johnny Cash band playing over here, but neighbors are getting together over here and talking about insurance, or talking about builders, or talking about utilities, or whatever it may be. There's a lot of shared knowledge that happens there, but it is not predominantly focused on the fire. Yeah, and I can imagine having the blankets right next to each other. There's a lot of cross-pollination and conversation. That didn't occur. Yeah. And as much as we loved that outdoor amphitheater at Farnsworth Park, this has created space for folks to be together. And you can just get up and walk over to someone all the way on the other side and have a conversation, when you really couldn't do that at Farnsworth Park. Yeah, silver lining. Silver lining. So you've talked about it a couple of times, but public education and the PUSD suffered greatly. I think 5 schools were
pretty much destroyed, and then another one partially.
Mm-hmm.
Why is public education so important to you? And what do you think how does it contribute to, I mean, we can talk more broadly as a democratic society, but how does it contribute to the fabric of our community?
The public schools in Altadena are a reflection of the community of Altadena. That's not the same for other schools, for whether they're charter schools or privately held schools that tend to reflect the families that they enroll. Our public schools are responsible for educating and enrolling all of our children, regardless of their race, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless of their physical ability or their mental ability. And that really is a microcosm of Altadena. And so when you looked at any of our schools that were serving Altadena, they represented Altadena because we worked so hard to get those schools to be neighborhood schools again. When, you know, we look back in the history when they stopped being neighborhood schools. And to know that there were people moving to Altadena to attend our schools was really a positive step forward for the schools, but for the district as well, because it was something, you know, they could sort of hang their hat of pride on.
Well, it's an attraction. Yes,
for sure, for sure. And if folks, you take something like the arts, and that attracts everyone from every cross section, right? It's not just privileged kids. It's every kid can benefit from an arts education. So, you know, for Elliott and Altadena Arts Magnet, and even the programs that Muir has established through its grant magnets, or magnet grants, it's critically important to our democracy. It's critically important that all children have equal access to education.
Unfortunately, we're coming to the close of our time, which I'm really sad because we've covered so much ground today. But I was wondering, just as a kind of a closing, what would you say to yourself as a 17-year-old, a rising senior? What kind of advice would you give yourself, or insight would you give yourself?
I would have probably told my 17-year-old self to get involved in civic engagement earlier than I did, because as our population ages and as older citizens are retiring, we don't have a base of younger folks that are taking over the mantles of a lot of our nonprofit organizations and a lot of the community organizations. So I probably would have told myself to get involved earlier.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being on The Power of One, and thank you for your insight and your wisdom. And thank you for everything you've done for Altadena, Pasadena, Sierra Madre community. It's really been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Of course.